Hey guys, Ryan Murphy here. Here doing my review of The Incredible Hulk. So if you didn't watch my last video on Iron Man, sort of my spiel here, my manifesto here is I'm trying to talk about films in a way that instead of just reviewing them and criticizing them, I'm trying to talk about the actual break down the structure. That's what I'm kind of all about is structure, and discuss how it might have been better. So that's sort of what I'm doing in this series, Ryan T. Murphy's Guide to Movies, doing the whole Marvel series first. So I want to talk about The Incredible Hulk. Now, this is a movie that hasn't been, I would say, as well received as Iron Man, but certainly not as poorly as some of the other ones. But I've always liked it. It's not a perfect film. And like I said in my last video, if you didn't watch it, you can go back and watch it because I talk a lot about how I'm going to be doing this. I break down my entire formula for doing this. So what I'm going to what I talk about is A and C. You know, what's the A and C of this movie? And this, to be fair, this is not a movie that has a huge degree of character growth or change. This is just sort of like Bruce Banner running from the bad guys kind of movie, and yeah, that's kind of what it is. He starts out on the run, and he ends it on the run. It's just sort of a lot of middle ground. Let's see part of this run where he gets caught up in this thing where he's found by the government, and he's also searching for this cure, and it's not very. I never really understood the ending, and I really think that it has not been fairly taken. It has not been followed up on by the subsequent Marvel movies, because it seems like he get there's a cure that works, but he basically has to be able to have access to it, which he doesn't have. And then we could talk about that later on when we do Avengers and Age of Ultron. I think it's most pertinent in Age of Ultron because that's when we see the Hulk after he's been sort of let back into the everyday life. And they kind of fail at letting us know anything about his life after that point. So, but Incredible Hulk. Let's talk about the three act structure. Okay, there's A and there's C. Basically, we're just gonna have the show of him on the run, and it ends with him. Does he get the cure? Does he not? Kind of, I don't, fill me in. But the middle of that is this run. So his transformations into the Hulk kind of bookmark these acts. So the first act is Rio de Janeiro, the favelas of Rio de Janeiro, and it's pretty basic. The bad guys find him and he runs. He's been communicating with this Mr. Blue, and he realizes he does have to go back home, which is going to get him in more hot water. But we do have a nice action scene, and I really like. It's more of the execution. I mean, it's just. And again, we'll talk about the scores because I can't stand the hatred against Marvel scores. I said Iron Man has a terrific score. The Incredible Hulk has an amazing score. Now, it doesn't necessarily have this super like iconic Hulk theme, like John Williams Superman theme, but I mean, it does have a Hulk theme. It's just not necessarily as in your face. But the music is very fast tempo, and it has this pace to it. And that comes out when he's running, in Rio de Janeiro, and there's this great chase music, and that just sort of plays again throughout the whole movie. And there's great love theme, and it really adds to the movie. And that's what I liked right away was there was this great, high tempo quality to the movie. When he's running from the bad guys, and then he runs into the guy that he had pissed off earlier. I mean, that's what we talked about those intricacies. And oh, that's nice. And then he runs into that guy. I love that. When I was watching the movie, I was really getting into that. Then we go into the second act, and he goes back home to the university and runs into his old love. Oh, she's with someone else. And then the bad guys come again, and he turns into the Hulk again. So literally, that's the end of the second act. You know, and of course, the movie has to do with his relationship with Betty Ross, and so that's a really great division point between acts two and three because the whole thing is he's lost his love. So act three is when they're finally back together, and they're going to do this together. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to get back together. It just kind of means there's a lot of awkwardness. And then they get to Mr. Blue, and yeah, this is going to be a much shorter video because it's kind of a very basic thing. And I really liked the movie when I saw it. It has a great pace to it, and that's what I really liked about it. I think what people don't like about it necessarily is that it's not super big on character development. And Iron Man, through its humor and through Robert Downey Jr. and through the chemistry he had with Gwyneth Paltrow and the writing, just you walked away from it feeling like you had made some friends. And I think that's always the good thing about a movie. My dad always said when I was growing up, my dad, who was not a film guy at all, had no idea he was raising someone who'd be a film fiend. But he just had a nice little thing. He said where I think a movie is good when you miss the characters, when it gets over and you miss the characters, and that's not as present in Incredible Hulk, and I'm not sure why. What is it about Iron Man that makes us like the characters more? Do we get to know them better? Okay, Tony Stark's a jackass. Can we describe in terms in words, Pepper Potts' character, and how can you describe anyone really? And then it gets me thinking, well, how do you know when you really know anyone? And existential crisis. But no, at the end of the day, they just didn't pop for me the way that Pepper popped and Tony popped, and I didn't come away caring for them. I didn't feel like I got to know them. They just didn't feel like to be much there, and so that's really the best way to fix it is to just I don't know. I mean, I know that Edward Norton had written scenes um, that were cut. Like there's actually early versions of the poster with his name on it, Edward Harrison, which is his middle name, as a writer. And his basically, I think that credit got nixed because the scenes that he wrote, basically that he had in his contract, that he would have to rewrite the script to include these. A lot of them got cut. I don't necessarily think it's about the about new scenes, but injecting dialogue into the existing scenes. That funky dialogue, that funny dialogue, is often that Joss Whedon did in the Avengers, and then Marcus and McFeely did after him in Infinity War. I mean, that's like what gets us to like a character. I mean, through humor, it really is. And that just wasn't as present in Incredible Hulk, and it doesn't really have as it doesn't really include a lot of change for the character. It's just sort of like a chase movie, but it's a really good chase movie. Like Iron Man, I would say that there is a villain in the end that's just sort of there to have a fun ending. He's not again, he doesn't really add anything. Like I said in my Iron Man review, Ironmonger is sort of an add-on. You have the whole first two acts, which are about Tony Stark becoming Iron Man, Tony Stark becoming a better person, and then you have just for fun, let's have him fight Jeff Bridges in an Ironmonger suit. That's sort of this. You have this character, Emil Blonsky, played by Tim Roth, who they build up to it throughout. The first time he fights him, and the second time he fights him, and then he says, "Pissed off and ready for round three." There you go. You got three acts. But that's all building up to be him becoming the Abomination. And I think it's thematic, I guess, because General Ross sort of created this. It's as much his fault as anybody else, the Hulk. And then, here he goes creating another one. I mean, he's the bad guy. He's the one that keeps screwing up, and yet he's not the one on the run. So I guess there's a thematic quality to that. As a comic book fan, I have to say that the biggest complaint is that I didn't feel the Abomination had actually been adapted. Not just like they didn't adapt him well, but that he's not adapted. When I think of the Abomination, I think of a character that looks like a certain way. And then I think of he's a Yugoslavian former Soviet spy. The comics are from the Cold War. So in this movie, he's a soldier from England. Apparently, from what I've heard, they didn't have Tim Roth do a foreign accent because they couldn't afford the dialect coach or something. They probably just didn't want him to have it. But they said he was born in Russia. Oh, so that. But I mean, not that any one of those like that where he's from matters that much, but what I'm thinking is that when I'm watching the movie, there's really nothing about this character other than the fact that it's a man who turns into a monster. That's the Abomination, and they never call him the Abomination, technically. So it's literally like, here's a guy who turns into a monster. And other than the fact that his name is Emil Blonsky, that's all he has in common with this comic book character. So I would have just liked to have seen so at the very least, him look like the Abomination when he transformed. You can discolor him a little bit because green on green is not necessarily aesthetically pleasing on screen. But they didn't have to change him and give him all the spines and everything. We want as comic book fans, and I'll talk about this in my later reviews. A huge reason why you're doing this is not just to make movies for the masses, but to make the fans feel like they have their what's on page brought on screen. And if you're not doing that, you got to question what you are doing. And so I wanted to see the Abomination. He said, "Oh, I didn't buy the fin ears because that doesn't make evolutionary sense." I'm like, dude, like, haven't you seen Star Trek Next Generation? Like these missing links and all that sort of stuff that we all have in our past. And plus, there's a whole scene in the movie where there's like jars of experiments that he's done. I mean, you could have easily worked something in the dialogue where there's something from one of those experiments that works its way into him. I don't know. That's what I would have liked to have seen. Still, in the end, it's not the Abomination really, but it's the monster. Hulk fights a monster. It's a great fight. I saw this just the year after Transformers, where the big fight between Optimus Prime and Megatron is so anticlimactic and left me so disappointed. And I remember seeing the Incredible Hulk and thinking that's what they should have done. There's lots of cool things. Again, just thrilling direction, thrilling action. When the fire that looks like the helicopter is going to explode and Hulk, you know, puts out the fire and then keeps up the fight. It's very kinetic. It's very nicely done, and that's the aspect of the movie I liked a lot. Whether or not it's the deepest movie, maybe not, but I liked it for that reason. And the only way I really wish it could have been better, besides the abomination thing, is just to have some perkier dialogue, to have bring out some color to the characters. So that's all. I'll be back with my review of Iron Man 2. So thanks a lot, guys.